What is up, everybody? My name is Blob and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are going to be extending the valley and building our cougar habitat on the hill here. This whole area is going to be called Cougar Creek and I cannot wait to show you how this one turned out. Super happy with it. Before we get into things, we are going to be laying down the foundations, and this is quintessentially going to be me placing a few objects. It's going to be the enrichment items for the Cougar, and then I have built a pillbox in a stream. Link to my Twitch is down in the description as usual. But this pillbox is sort of going to be like the main, not selling point of the habitat per se, but it is going to be like the talking point of the habitat. While a lot of the foliage across the habitats up to this point have been the same, I want every habitat to have its own like different unique selling point, as it were. The last one had the river going through the middle of it with the ammo leopards, and this time round I decided that I was going to do a World War II style pillbox that had been abandoned, and the sanctuary have just basically kept it as somewhere that the cougar can sort of climb up to, and I end up putting some enrichment on top of there as well. And it is worth noting in the background that you might have seen like a bit of a gap in the bottom of the hill. I'm not going to be building the indoor area or the lodge that is going to be overlooking the habitat for this episode. That is going to be coming in the next episode. I'll be doing like a big staff area at the bottom of the hill. And basically it's going to be the point where multiple keepers are going to be able to get to for probably about the next 3 or 4 animals, including the cougar in this one. And then the lodge I want to build as part of maybe like a little garden or something like that as well. So I want to put that in a separate episode as well, so I can maybe do a bit more in-depth talking about my foliage process as well. Just trying to make this look as sort of kind of realistic as I possibly can. I'm aware that the cougars can probably jump over this fence, but I just want to keep the fence low and not anything too tall, so I do end up using just like the normal in-game electric barriers. It's just occurred to me that I've done this habitat and I need to go back and put electric posts over the top of each of the metal posts, so that's something that you'll see me address at a later date as well. And then the rock work as well, I end up changing quite a bit of this. I thought when I was going through it on stream last that it was a bit too green, so what I've ended up doing is going through and deleting a little bit of the foliage and just putting some more rock work in, just to make it have more of that like ridgy valley feel rather than just like an overgrown forest type feel. And I'm really happy with how it turned out in the end. This is a trick you've seen me use multiple times as well. Basically, when you place a path down and then place enrichment items on top of it, and you normally, it gets the flattened foundation, it like messes all the terrain up. If you place a path down, it basically stops that from happening. Rocks and foliage, nothing here you haven't already seen before from me. I went a bit easier on the buffalo grass this time round, and I say this as you see me in the background basically spamming it, but I'd sort of try and sink it in the ground as much as I can. I wanted there to be a few like dirt paths where the cougar would potentially be walking through this habitat quite a lot, but also trying to keep in theme with the pillbox as well. Like this pillbox might have had like a path where people were constantly walking up to give it maintenance checks, because it's maybe not the safest building in the world. Like you can see, it's quite dilapidated, and obviously it would have to be checked as being maybe like a potential risk to the cougar, but they can't get the means to remove it as of yet. So maybe we could see that as like a hurdle that the sanctuary has to overcome in terms of the future and stuff like that. But for the time being, they assess it on a regular basis to make sure that it doesn't pose a threat to the cougar inside. And I'm really happy with the foliage work here. It's very basic as per usual, just sort of this like buffalo grass, and then I like build up the rear of the habitat with things like the creosote bushes, and then I end up doing the usual thing. I'll go through and I'll select filters for the cougar so that I can specifically get some sort of more North American themed foliage in here as well. In the end, I end up picking quite a few spruce trees, really nice looking trees, nothing too eye-catching, but when you see a spruce tree that it sort of gives that American feel, and without sort of minimal impact, which speaks volumes for the tree as a whole, really. So constantly checking sightlines again, like it's something that you'll see me do an awful lot. Putting some Yorkshire grass in here just for some extra tall texture. I was speaking to someone about this not too recently, but we don't really have much in the way of like sort of weedy type grass. Obviously we had the nettles, but you don't really see them growing in like the middle of patches of grass. They'll tend to sort of like grow on the edges of paths and stuff like that, and you don't really see them in the middle of grass. So Yorkshire grass sort of acts as like a tall piece of foliage that sticks out amongst the buffalo grass, just to give it a little bit of like variation in height as well. And then terrain paint grass underneath the buffalo grass as per usual, using the rock along the rock surfaces, and then light dirt around the edge of the grass where it's going to be meeting the areas where it's bare and there is no grass, and then just like sort of clicking in sand in the bare areas as well. In the background, I'm going to start doing the American foliage. You can see me here using the Wikipedia to sort of just pick out what the biomes are that I need to filter down to. But I thought this would be a good time to throw in my usual animal facts, and today obviously we're going to be covering the cougar. The cougar, which is often commonly referred to as the puma or the mountain lion, is the second largest cat in North America, the first largest being the jaguar, which has started to see its way creep up from South America and being spotted in areas of North America as well. So that's a cool little fact. I certainly didn't know that one. Like a lot of big cats as well, they can't actually roar. They just tend to decide to just purr like big house cats. For the most part, the cougar has no natural enemies and it sits atop of the food chain. However, occasionally they do have to compete with other predators such as bears and wolves for food. During most of their lives, cougars are actually solitary creatures as well. They interact only to mate, which can happen at any time of the year basically. Females breed as early as 2 to 3 years old and give birth to 2 to 3 kittens as well. They raise their young, while males tend to just return off to their solitary lives. After around 2 years old, cougar offspring will leave their mother and start their own life. Some travel far to establish their own territory, as cougars need a lot of room in order to roam. Not really a fun fact about cougars, more specifically a fact about me, but out of all of the big cats that are in this game, or cats, I'm not going to say big cats because I know that that's a very convoluted subject, and I'm going to cover that at some point in a future video. But the models for the cougars are probably my favorites of all the large cats in the game, without a doubt. They're so good, and the offspring are just adorable. They're to die for. In a moment, we are going to be moving on to the viewing platform. This was an area that I was kind of not looking forward to doing. I do struggle with the viewing areas a little bit, but I'm really happy with how this area turned out in the end. And there's going to be some signs that I'll be showing at the end of this video referring to a cub club that we have basically started in the sanctuary. The premise being that it's like a monthly based subscription. You come in, you pay your monthly subscription, and there's a number of benefits that come along with paying that. You get discounts on your entry fee tickets, you get a plushie, like a gift bag when you sign up as well that has a multitude of items in. You get newsletters from us as well that tell you what's going on in the sanctuary as well. This is something that I've seen in quite a few zoos and sanctuaries, and I'm really glad to have something like it incorporated into our sanctuary as well. At the end of the day, conservation is the aim of the game, and the only way that a lot of things can be done through conservation is to fund them. So 100% of the profits generated by the Cub Club are basically going to conservation efforts all across the world with regards to aiding big cats back into the wild. So yeah, that is basically going to be the foliage portion of this video done. I do come back and add a few bits a little bit later on to sort of like the outskirts of the area, but the bulk of it is pretty much done. And now we're going to be moving on to the viewing area. So the viewing area is something that, like I say, I was not too keen on getting into. It's something of an Achilles heel of mine, but I kind of had an idea of what I wanted this to be like, sort of a semicircle viewing platform with a shelter bit over the top. I end up using a couple of blueprints for this. If you do want to get your hands on any of these blueprints, let me know and I will definitely get them out to you, but I'm not gonna just sort of sling stuff up on the workshop just hoping that people might want them. If people want them, I will put them up on the workshop, but it's sort of just more to keep my workshop from being too cluttered. But I end up making this like sort of semicircle, and then I extend it by one and then add this semicircle onto the other side as well. And then I end up using a combination of a glass barrier blueprint that I have made, and then I end up making like a barrier using the conservation panels as well, along with some of the, I don't know what they're called, they're like bracket pieces, hinge pieces, where they're like the beam, the little nubs that stick out. You'll see them when I come to use them, but basically it's just rounding off the edge of this here. And then for whatever reason, I spend time trying to sort the terrain out here. And I think in the end, I end up just giving up and then just make a very slight ramp so that it just merges the path into the concrete that I've used for the foundation of the viewing platform. The little dirt speck you see there on the floor, I end up sort of surrounding that with small coloured faux rocks and just putting a little tree in there as well. I think I end up using an aspen in the end because it was the only one that I could find that was North America themed, but it also didn't have quite a low like starting base for the tree, like leaves, if that makes sense. So it was a taller trunk so people wouldn't sort of brush their face into leaves as they go past. So the original idea here, you can see I'm putting some planters in, and then I was going to sort of just like put a couple of plants in them, and then I just sort of like realized that I might as well just pivot these pieces of concrete to make a ever so slight ramp. Like, it's literally the smallest thing, you wouldn't notice unless you were actually paying attention to it. And then here you can see me using my first blueprint for, again, this is my blueprint. This is something I made a while ago now, and it's these like glass metal barrier type things. I was going to do it all the way around, and then I realized that the sizing on these barriers is a little bit too awkward, so I only use it on the side. And then at the front here, you see me basically extend it out so that it's one wider panel at the front. And this is quite an old blueprint, and you can tell because I'm not using the glass panels. Instead, I'm using like the panes of glass that are quite thick. Obviously, if I was to redo this, I'd probably use the thinner ones. In fact, I might redo it just so that I'm not using as many pieces. But to be honest, with the amount of buffalo grass that I've already placed in this zoo, I think pieces should be the least of my worries at the moment. But if I do remake it, or you want this blueprint, let me know and I'll stick it up on my workshop for sure, and I'll update the description of this video. And then just using these marquee metal post beams just to sort of hide where the glass is overlapping. And then I end up using another blueprint of mine afterward, which is a canopy style covering. It's just basically I think they're like Indian drapery pieces, I think they're called, or something like that. And they're literally just held together with like some rope, and then there's like metal posts at the front and back to hold it up. But here I'm just sort of like thinking what I could do for the cornery type pieces. And originally I start using these Australia logs, and then I soon realized that it kind of looks ridiculous and resort back to my original plan, which was to just use some planks. And I'm really happy with the use of the conservation planks here because it really fits, I think, with the different colors and stuff like that. And then like it being held together with that cool bracket piece. Cheeky little log getting stuck in the habitat there. I love these fallen logs. They really add like quite a lot of character to a habitat. But I start off by just sort of placing them in a row to each other, and then I just sort of start messing around with the heights on them, and then start rotating some, changing some into the sort of like different colors as well, flipping them as well, just to make sure that you haven't got that weird knot of wood in the middle of every single one, because obviously it just makes it end up looking quite repetitive. And when you're trying to make something look quite normal and natural, the repetition is something you really want to try and avoid. So that is going to be my little tip for this video. If you're working with these wooden panel pieces or planks or anything like that, just make sure you're constantly rotating them and adjusting the height so that it doesn't all look the same. And then here you see me using that metal piece that I was talking about. I end up just making sort of two bits to look like it's holding it together, and then copy it down. And then I just end up copying the whole like panel and then just pasting it in a few places. I end up using it for the corners of the viewing platform, and then I end up sort of extending it by a couple of panels along the part beyond the platform as well. That doesn't actually go anywhere. I just end up putting some seating in there as well, but it's still somewhere that you can view the Cougars from if you want to. You actually get quite a nice view of the tower in the background if you're standing in the right spot. But that's something I was trying to be conscious of when I was doing this to begin with. I didn't want the lodge across the way to block the view of the tower. Like I say, the more places I can get the tower viewable from in this sanctuary, the better. Purely because that tower is going to be a reference point for a lot of people in this sanctuary that are trying to sort of find their way around if they can't locate a map. And this is the canopy I was talking about. I end up doing a little bit of adjusting with the posts. This one here at the back, I sort of messed around with and then realized I couldn't do the same with this other side here. So I end up deleting it and using thicker logs, and then using the bundled rope pieces around the top of the log to make it look like it was wrapped around. And then some column pieces at the bottom of these logs so that they're not just like clipping into the ground. It does look like they were sort of inserted with a little bit of thought in mind, rather than me just plonking them in the ground, because it does look a bit unnatural that way. It's a nice little detail without having to go overboard on pieces as well. So obviously these 2 rope pieces, I'm using 2 of them just to make it wrap around the log properly without any real clipping. And then this column piece at the bottom is literally just 1 piece. So the log has literally ended up having 3 additional pieces put onto it just for that little bit of detail. And I think it really does help elevate it just that tiny bit more. Here's when I make the decision, don't really care about the planter anymore, and sort of just tilt the panel so that they end up forming this little ramp for this area as well. And the color blends surprisingly well with this path, and there's me just checking to make sure that the canopy bit there wasn't too low, because I was a bit worried that you might slap your face into it if you was to walk into it. But yeah, really happy with the coloring of the path along with the canopy. But I think the canopy kind of helps that the shade helps the light stop shining on that path, and then you being able to spot the difference in the colors. So maybe that's a way of cheating it, you know, like if you can't quite get the color to match how you want it to, make it so that it's in like a darkened area so that you can't really spot the differences in those colors. Maybe, I don't know, I'd have to do some more like looking into it to see whether that was the case, but I think it does kind of help here, especially with the way that the shadow falls on the ground. And we're just doing the last few details on this little area here. You just saw me putting some grass at the back there just to blend it into the path. And then here's me deciding what sort of tree to put. I ended up putting like a maple here at first, and then realized that it's just too low and too bushy. So end up resorting to an aspen tree, because like I say, it's quite a tall tree. You don't have to worry about people clouting their heads on it or getting poked in the eye by one of the branches. And then just put a bunch of faux rocks at the bottom here just to help it blend into the path without it just being dirt laid on top of the path, basically. It's one of those instances where I couldn't get my little path trick to work in terms of avoiding these sorts of things, but you know, like I say, the pathing in this game is hella awkward to work with, so sometimes you have to just cope with it and work around it. And I think I managed to get a nice little result because of it. And then the fence on the other side here, just adding it wherever I can. I'll probably end up using it in some other places as well leading up to Cougar Creek, purely because if you're using the same types of designs, I think it helps tie the areas together. You don't really want to walk from one area to another and then the design and the aesthetic just completely changes, because it doesn't make you feel like you're part of the same area or the same park, as it were. And jumping into the finer details here now, we've got our retaining wall that we are going to be copying over. This is purely just to sort of separate the edge of the habitat from what is going to be another staff area for this side. This area is going to be catered to for the Amber leopards and probably the sand cat. I think I want to get a different terrain type of cat in for the next video, because I've been doing a lot of these sandy type, these temperate type cats, as of late. So I think I might try and move on to a sand type one afterward, like a caracal or a sand cat. But let me know what you think about that in the comments below. But this retaining wall is something I really do actually kind of like more than I thought I would. And there's just me joining it up to the rear wall here. So when you're standing on the right, you can obviously see where it like sits flush, but obviously then it's just a sheer drop on the other side, so the cougar can't get down. Just me painting out a little area here for the lodge. Not sure why, because I don't end up doing it in this video. And then I'm just sort of like flying around trying to get some good angles in as well. This area here is where we're going to be doing the wall for the indoor area for the cougar, and the staff area that's going to accommodate the cougar and multiple other animals. But like I say, for now it's just going to be a concrete wall with the keeper gate in, and then I'll be challenging that in the next episode, just so that I can get that bit sorted, and I then don't have to worry about it for the next 3 or 4 animals that are going to go on that side of the sanctuary. Here I'm just placing mulch on top of the pillbox so that I can add the pronghorn antelope item to the top. And this is an example of me and why I shouldn't be building so early on in the mornings. I was building this quite early on, and every time I placed the pronghorn antelope down, it kept falling over, and I was getting very irritated as to why that was the case, and I couldn't really work out why it was. And I worked out it was because the pronghorn item is obviously larger than the weird semi-spherical item that it stands on, it was dropping, and then the rear legs were slipping off of that and then falling backwards. I thought it's because the mulch wasn't flush, but again, I just shouldn't be building this early on in the morning, and it shows here. But again, I leave these mistakes in so that you can learn from them, and you can see that people who build these things and make videos to YouTube aren't superhuman. They don't get everything right the first time of asking, and I'm still trying to sort it out. And then eventually the stone drops, because I start dropping all of the grass and deleting the grass, because I realize that the mulch is actually a lot lower than what the grass is showing. And then, like I say, I sort of realize and just leave this here. I haven't seen them use this log to get out to the pronghorn yet, but I will see if I can get it so that they do, just so that I think that'd be a really cool view if you're up on that viewing platform and seeing the cougar climb up on top of the pillbox. They might even be able to jump up there without the log, because they can jump quite high. And then here I'm just adding in the concrete dome and finishing the rest of the wall to the habitat, so I can end up getting one in and checking all the traversable area for it. If I haven't mentioned already, this is going to be home to just one cougar for the time being, and it's going to be a male cougar. And I've actually managed to get some really cool lore for it, but we'll cover that toward the end of the video when we are having a look at the cougar using the habitat. This is, again, all just temporary. This is going to have like a massive overhaul. I want this to be like more of a... This is going to have like quite a modern feel to it, I think. And it's going to cover most of the buildings. We're going to use like a larger staff building, so that if you were to sort of build this in franchise, it would work. I don't want to just like cheat the system and just turn all of the needs off for the animals and stuff like that. So I want it to still say like semi-relevant to the management side of the game. And then I just start checking the traversable area, and soon enough I realized that quite a lot of this is escapable because the cougar can jump quite high. And this is where a plant like saltwort can be your best friend. Luckily for me, saltwort is something that falls within the parameters of the cougar's habitat needs, like biome and stuff. So I'd end up just like placing quite a bit of this to just block off where the cougar can climb up to, because it looks nice, and B, it's got quite a big hitbox on it, so you can use it quite efficiently to block off these areas. I do a bit of a dumb, and I sort of look at these trees and think maybe they can climb up the trees and get out. And at this point they absolutely can, and I start working on some trunk, I don't know what you call them. They're like anti-climb measures basically for animals. So I end up wrapping these logs around, and then soon realize that I just hate the look of it, and then resort to the mesh chain link fence. Tilt it up slightly, copy it across, and then just copy it so that it makes like a circle ring around the top of the tree, so that a cougar can still use the tree to scratch at, but it can't climb up the tree in order to get out of. I think it works quite well. I mean, if it was, those of you that are more in touch with the realism side of the game, you might be able to tell me whether this is something that's actually realistic or not. But I end up just placing one of these like up sort of some of the trees I think they would get to, and yeah, and then the cougar just instantly proves me wrong by just running straight up to the tree and climbing up of it. So I turn the climbing up on the trees, turning the climbing off on the trees I place these around on. And just doing a few little details here now to the viewing area, just adding a few signs in, adding some bins, benches, that sort of thing, just to keep the guest side of things in check. And then I just end up inserting another sign here. I was going to put it in the middle here, but I've realized that the footing to keep this sign a balance is actually quite large, so it sits just next to the bridge here. And then I add my custom sign in here for the Cougar Creek that you can see, and then I add the other signs in for the Cub Club. But I'll give you a closer look at these after the animal shots of the cougar. And speaking of the cougar, let's go and meet him, shall we? And it's time to meet our cougar. This is Tonquin, and Tonquin is named after a valley near a little zoo that you might have heard of called TNS True North Sanctuary. Sparrow was kind enough to allow me to sort of use her zoo as part of the lore in this instance, and the lore is as follows. Basically, Tonquin was rescued along with his sister Edith, who still resides at TNS, and once old enough, Tonquin was sent across to PAWS, and I'm sure he's going to make an absolutely fantastic addition to our zoo. But again, thanks so much to Sparrow, and I'll put a link to the description for her entire project. really happy with how the cinematography came out this time around. I think the filter really helps add something. And more on the lore front. In front of you here, you can see me with a sign that I have created in Canva. It's so good. I absolutely adore it. But what you can see in front of you here is the sign for the Cub Club. The benefits, as you can see, are listed here. You can pause it to read them, but super happy with how this screen turned out. The images are ones that are all taken from within the sanctuary, apart from the Cougar. But I think I can get away with just using that one. And I think the addition of the plushie as an individual object really helped in terms of sort of help selling this. And I've scattered them in a few places around the zoo. I'm going to be doing this quite a bit with these. It's sort of going to be one of the main ways that the sanctuary can help provide funds. Here you can see it by the Amur Leopard feeding and Amur Leopard resting spot. And that is going to be me wrapping up this episode. I hope you have enjoyed watching me build this habitat. It's been an absolute joy to build. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out. I love you all. And I'll catch you all in the next video.